We're talking about security for the Jewish community in America and here in Florida. For that conversation, I'm joined by Rabbi Mendy Dubrowski. He's the director of the South Tampa branch of Chabad, a chaplain to the Tampa Police Department, and a chaplain to the F.B.I. Jonathan Ellis, chair of the Tampa Jewish Community Relations Council, and Special Agent Susana Mapu from the Tampa Division of the F.B.I. Well, there's been a significant rise in the number of acts of vandalism, harassment, physical attack. Is American Jewry, Special Agent Mapu, in more danger than it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago? Is that simply an objective fact?
Well, we know from the recent hate crime statistics that anti-Semitism crime has gone up in general, not just anti-Semitism, but in general hate crimes has gone up 64% since last year. Over the past 5 years, it has gone up 25%.
When you amass data like that, how does a national law enforcement agency respond? What tools do you have to respond to those numbers?
The F.B.I. looks at two different events: a hate incident, which would be something that's pretty much maybe a freedom of speech type comment, but that has racial slurs, and a hate crime. A hate crime we consider any typical crime that's solely motivated by somebody's religion, race, ethnicity, etc. The F.B.I. wants to know about both hate incidents and hate crimes. As you know, the F.B.I. is an intelligence-based agency, and we collect a lot of information. That information is very important for us to know so that we can, in our area of responsibility, so that we can deter, prevent, address any incidents that may be happening. If we are seeing a pattern or any issues, we will meet with the various individuals, or if there's a specific threat, we are mandated to let them know that maybe their safety, there's a potential for an issue with their safety, and we will knock on doors and advise as much as we can ahead of the threat. And obviously we try to prevent them before it happens.
Jonathan Ellis, does prudence require that you be aware of who's out there, what they're saying, what they're threatening?
There has to be a level of prudence. You don't want to close your eyes. You don't want to pretend that something doesn't exist that exists. You want to take certain precautions. So for instance, the Jewish community, at least with its institutions, generally on any type of incident, always allows, notifies law enforcement, whether it's an incident or whether it's a crime on an immediate basis. You need to take precautions, so while people may not fear under the Bible, they certainly have the ability to understand what's out there, and they have a level of comfort when they're in an institution, whether that's a police car sitting out in front of a synagogue on high holy days, or having a primarily Jewish event take place, that there is actual law enforcement present. You want to make sure that those signs are there, and those signs can, a lot of times, even if there would be a potential crime, can prevent it just by the mere showing of law enforcement, or by having proper security around the perimeter, such as only one entrance in, locked doors, security cameras, all of those things each Jewish institution looks at specifically, and they work with the F.B.I. and they work with law enforcement to make sure they're properly prepared to the extent capable of for these incidences.
Is this exhausting? I mean, to stay Jewish, which is imperative, obviously, is there a point at which you just say, oh, come on, again, now? Do I really have to do this now? Or is it almost like a second skin? It's always there in the back of your mind.
I think it depends on our perspective and the narrative that we help play for our communities. Yes, security is important. Yes, the safety of our parishioners, our attendees, should always be our priority. But we need to make sure, as Jewish leaders and Jewish institutions, that we match our commitment to security with our commitment to inspiration, to motivation, that the experience that someone has is such that the security becomes a side issue. something that we must go through in order to be able to practice properly without fear of intimidation. But if that becomes the narrative, if that becomes the talking point, the amount of security guards that were outside, or the number of cars, or what kind of weapons they were carrying, or so on and so forth, then we will continue to lose Jews from communal life. And that's the greatest threat, I believe, that we face today. I'm very aware of the anti-Semitism, but I'm even more concerned about Jewish apathy, because at some point, if it's laborious, if it's too much of a chore, then people simply drop out. And as someone that has lived around the world and experienced Jewish life in many countries and in many different forms, I can tell you that it doesn't matter necessarily how many guards are standing outside. It matters what's happening on the inside. If you can light up someone's soul, if you really take them to another place in that spiritual service, in that spiritual moment, then the armed guards or the metal detectors will become a necessary inconvenience. The same way we go through it when we fly, because we're going somewhere great. That has to be our motivation as Jewish institutions. We're here to take you somewhere amazing. And yes, you may be inconvenienced for a few moments in order to protect everyone's safety and security, but it's well worth the trip.
What can organizations like yours do, Jonathan Ellis, to be smart, be strategic, be aware, but also show a face to the wider community?
So the Jewish community has always had a developed sense of social action. You can see that when you wind up looking at Martin Luther King and see the number of Jews that were involved in the civil rights movement. When you look at the Jewish Community Relations Council, you see a number of those things taking place. So for instance, there's outreach to different communities. For instance, take the black community. We have formed the Black Jewish Community Cooperative that is working to ensure that underprivileged students have the ability to get into college, working with them, for instance, to make sure they can maintain a certain grade point level, work with them as mentors, and see what we can do to get them into college if they're at the cusp of possibly going or not going. You see it with Jewish Family Services and what they do within the community. And even though it's called Jewish Family Services, it doesn't serve only Jewish people, it serves the entire community. And you have those levels of outreach that are just ingrained within the community, Jewish community.
I was interviewing the head of a refugee services, a historic refugee services agency, and he says, well, we got started to help people get out of the countries they were in because they're Jewish. Now we continue to do our work because we're Jewish. And it seemed like a perfect expression of what you're talking about.
No, absolutely. And you saw this when you were trying to get people out of Russia a number of years ago, when you wound up having people coming to the United States, when you had these issues in Russia and moving, certain people who were Jewish into Russia, from Russia into the United States. And you're seeing it now with beginning a number of Jewish organizations attempting to help the Afghanistan people who are coming over.
Threat, a reasonable response to threat is to circle the wagons, look inside, become more insular. But it sounds like you're saying the play is actually to be out there more, to push out.
The Jewish community is ingrained within the United States. It just is that way, and as part of that, you're working with the larger problems. And as you work with people who are not necessarily familiar with Jewish people or haven't dealt with them on a day-to-day basis, these are where you form these underlying relationships. And these are what makes the largest difference in these types of situations. People get to meet people who are Jewish, they get to see them, they see that they have concerns that are substantially broader than just being Jewish, and this just helps the community as a whole.
You're a chaplain to a police department, you're a chaplain to F.B.I. agents. Are you a teacher as well as a spiritual advisor, keeping people on their toes, looking for the signs?
I'm always a teacher. In every aspect of my life, my goal is to try and educate and to share and enlighten. And so when given the opportunity, I jumped to be able to help them and empower them do their job. That can mean working through very challenging situations that they face. They sometimes see the most ugly aspects of human nature. It also helps them work through their communication strategies. And then most recently, I am able to serve as a resource to help them understand what the fight against anti-Semitism looks like. What is going to elicit such a big response? Why will people be sensitive to a particular caricature or a particular expression or trope, so that they can be sensitive to it as well and hopefully stop it before it escalates?
I'll bet a lot of agents grew up in places where, no knock on them, they probably didn't grow up knowing a lot of Jewish people.
Absolutely, and we had Rabbi Dubrowski come to our office to teach us about Jewish cultural sensitivities, which was an eye-opener, and we learned so very much from that training that will help us with our investigations and speaking to the Jewish community.
Special Agent, if someone sees something, a member of the community hears something that just doesn't sit right with them, where do you start when you hear about a hate incident that's being planned, hear of the organization of a group that may have hate at its core? What should a member of the community do?
We absolutely encourage the community to contact us, whether it's by phone at 1-800-CALL-FBI, by email at tips@fbi.gov. They can call our office here in Tampa. We have field offices throughout the state, 56 field offices, so they can reach to any of our offices. They can also contact the local police. They will share that information with us as well. Whichever way they're comfortable, we want to know. We take their information as confidential. We protect their identity. And if they are the victim of a hate crime, we have a victim specialist that will help them figure out their feelings, provide resources depending on what type of crime it was. They will also our victim specialist will let the victims know of any legal proceedings that are occurring throughout the investigation and prosecution of that crime.
You're not in law enforcement, so not the same question, but a similar question. Is it important for you to know if in the suburbs, in the many communities here, something happens? Is it important for you to know, or does life just roll on?
We want it. The community wants to know and works very closely with law enforcement. So the first issue is whenever you see something like this is to report it to law enforcement. It's surprising what law enforcement may know with everybody communicating to law enforcement that an individual person doesn't see. They may only see the anti-Semitic spray paint. They may not be able to put together this is one of 15 incidences, or that there's a growing trend. Law enforcement can keep track of that and put that together, and then we'll generally let the community know when there are issues or when you need to sort of raise security or problems. And by working very closely with law enforcement, it's imperative that there be open communication, which I think our community has, not only with the FBI, but also with Tampa Police, as well as the sheriff's departments.
And Rabbi, is that an assignment for everybody? Not just for Jews worried about themselves, but a community worried about its own soul?
I've seen this on a personal level when I myself was targeted and was able to work with law enforcement to address the threat. And I've seen it on a communal level. And sometimes law enforcement isn't the only tool in our arsenal. So you have to work with lawyers, you have to work with educators, and of course with law enforcement. But first and foremost, we need to make sure that there is a response. When you see something bad, you see something that is wrong, that it's called out and that it's addressed. And law enforcement, leadership, rabbis, community presidents, everyone, every human being has a stake in that responsibility.
Thank you all. Special Agent Susana Mapu, Jonathan Ellis, Rabbi Dubrowski.